We announce at these historic moments the liberation of all administrative borders of Tarhouna city.
On the morning of June the 5th, 2020, the spokesman for the Libyan army Muhammad Ignunu announced from the center of Tarhouna the liberation of the city and all its administrative borders, in addition to all western region cities from the grip of Al-Kaniyat and Haftar-backed mercenaries. The joyful announcement did not last long, as Libyans were bracing for the tragic Saturday and the death triangle, which cut wounds in the people even before the start of unearthing mass graves to find the missing ones. Our journey to Tarhouna started from the Libyan capital Tripoli, and we headed to the city that is about 90 kilometers to the southeast of Tripoli. And there lies the rural city that is called by Libyans the City of Olive and Peace. It was known for its diverse residents from different tribes, and its fertile plains were an attracting target for the Italian occupiers. Yet, it was marginalized during the rule of Gaddafi, just like the rest of the cities. So young men from Tarhouna had no choice but to either join Gaddafi military brigades or work on olive farms. However, some people from the city managed to take another turn and became doctors, engineers, scholars, and farmers, despite the hardships and the luring benefits of joining military brigades. So, how was Tarhouna, with a population of about 400,000 people, turned from a city of peace to an unorganized crime place and a military base from which wars had been waged and in which outlaw gangs have found a safe haven, turning the city from a place where olives were picked to a ghost city where lives are easily lost and mass graves are the norm?
Triangle of death, or what was called by Al-Kani the triangle of the traitors. The whole story of a family that managed to make an entire city intimidated and terrorized by murders.
In this location, tens of innocent people were killed as the residents of Tarhouna watched. Innocent civilians from all tribal and social backgrounds were killed as Al-Kani militias did not bother themselves to sort those people out. They just wanted to kill, whether the victims were children, women, or men. So the tragic Saturday was just a weekly event for the residents of the city, who kept waking up to new bodies tossed at the triangle of death in an attempt by the militias to keep the people of Tarhouna terrorized. In this journey, we have tried to answer a number of very essential questions that have so far puzzled Libyans as well as legal activists and the world. What happened in Tarhouna? Who were Al-Kaniyat militiamen, and how did they grip the city under their control? How did they manage to commit those horrendous crimes for years in the presence of different governments? And how did Haftar manage to use Tarhouna as a military base for his aggression on Tripoli and western region cities? Abu Bakr Jaballah, a member of a family that has been known for generosity and trade in Tarhouna, he joined us in our journey. His family was targeted by Al-Kaniyat gangs for their social status and role in February Revolution back in 2011, not for their political opposition. Their social status made the family lose 10 persons, 8 of whom were found in mass graves, while the 2 others' whereabouts are still unknown.
We were surprised that they had killed my cousin on the road. They wanted to steal his car, and he resisted them, refusing to give up his car. So they killed him with about 19 gunshots and left him on the roadside and took his car.
The car of the gunmen who killed him bore the writings, the General Command, Sierra Leone 9th Brigade. They left the body, and when they returned to it, they started opening fire. So we tried to pull the body away from their side because they wanted to take it.
Then we went there and took the body home. We washed it and wrapped it in a shroud to take him for a burial. But they told us not to do so until we give you orders. So tomorrow we can bury him and give him a family-only funeral without any strangers.
We tried to bury the body, but we were immediately under attack by about 100 gunmen using all forms of heavy and medium weapons. There was a wall from that direction. A Tiger tank shielded the wall and brought it down, and then they came here and started.
From all of the axes, from here, there and there, from all four directions. A militia of young men on armed vehicles appeared. We couldn't identify them or their affiliation. They came fully armed and started opening fire on our family.
Opening fire using medium weapons, and you can see the house windows shattered, and the other house burst a lot of bullet holes. So after with their attack, we started to run away, but he managed to capture 10 of us. They shoved them in a vehicle with a total of 25 to 30 people. When they arrived at the security backup unit in Tarhouna, they released those who are not from Jaballah family. Then we had to leave the city unwillingly, and they later robbed our houses. Other houses were used for accommodation by Al-Jahim Brigade.
They stole our stores and 3 workshops and power cables, and now we bought everything new for 8 houses and our stores and workshops.
We are still following the news of the mass grave, and we go almost daily to the graves and assist the authority of finding and identifying the missing person. We always have a look at everybody they dig out of mass graves because we want to know the fate of our sons. Of course, they tried to divert attention before saying that our sons were in eastern Libya, but that was just nonsense. We kept searching with the authority teams in the mass graves, and we were shocked to see a grave at Mashua Rabat area that contained 10 bodies. An individual called us and said there were 10 bodies. So we rushed to the area and saw that 8 of 10 bodies are from Jaballah family, and thanks be to Allah. Those murderers were buried in full clothes and without any proper burial. They had been buried there for 14 months, and they looked just like they did when they buried them. You know what I mean. They all left children behind. My brother was an engineer, my cousin was a doctor, another was an economy graduate, and yet another one founded a charity for Abdullah Jaballah. They were all educated.
I swear we had nothing to do with any of this. Those who were detained had nothing to do with the conflict, politics, or anything else. They just framed us, and we asked Allah to do us justice. I don't know if the people in the East have any sympathy for us. We're all Libyans and care about the well-being of Libya. We love security and we want to live just like everyone else. What was their guilt to be murdered like that? They could take them to the court, and if they had done anything wrong, the law can solve the problem. We abide by the rule of law.
My daughter escaped. She was crying because of the sound of the bullets, and the gunman was laughing at her. He was shooting under her legs, so she ran away on foot through the farm until she reached our neighbors, and by chance, it was olive picking season, and they heard the sound of gunshots and people fleeing. So they saw my daughter and took her to their house, where she stayed for 2 days. Of course, on the same night, we all fled to Tripoli. I couldn't find my daughter and was looking for her and wondering whether they took her or not. But a man called me and said he saw her on the farm. Then one of the neighbors brought her to me on Al-Shat Road in Tripoli. She was traumatized and couldn't speak for 5 days. All of our children are now traumatized. Once they see a camera or weapon, they start crying.
We went with Jaballah to a number of families who suffered the same pain caused by Al-Kaniyat, with different kind of circumstances of abduction killing, and forced disappearances.
Tunis Mukhtar is a widow with a family of 7. 2 of her sons were kidnapped by Al-Kani gang, and they had been missing since then. One of them was born in 2000 and the second in 2002. Their whereabouts are still unknown.
They were students, but the kidnappers didn't take them from the school or the street. But they came to their house at night and entered their bedroom and took them from their sleep. A group of gunmen circulated the house and entered from all 3 doors and the kitchen door. By chance, I was up and I was going to drink water before Fajr prayer because I was going to fast at 2:30 a.m. I heard sounds because they entered from all doors, and I opened the kitchen door and thought there was someone sick from the neighbor's house. So I wanted to check out. So a gunman came to the window and asked me where my sons were. I said my sons were young and were sleeping. What do you want with them? He said, you must now bring them out. The other 2 gunmen were kicking the house door violently. So I told him to wait for me to open it because I had no pay money to fix the door. I opened the door and didn't thought they could ever be after the kids and they wanted to take them. I didn't have anything to be afraid of. We're not involved in politics or military or even the police. And we're not siding with neither East nor West. We're merely a civilian family. Our security is just us, at home and our land. As you saw how spacious the land is, and my kids were playing football here, and when the time for land work comes, we do our jobs and pick olives, and that is about it. We have nothing to hide, and the country's issues are simply not related to our work and lives. The gunman took my sons from their beds. He took them mid-sleep. I swear that we're involved in nothing. They were just orphan boys. Their father died when they were in their elementary school at ages 8 and 9. I raised them well, and everyone in Tarhouna can bear witness to their good manners. But they took them. I don't know why they kidnapped them from their beds. I just want to know the reason. I want the kidnappers to tell me why they took them. I've been suffering days and nights in Ramadan and during Eid. All I could think about was them, and I keep crying out, burning heart that is yearning to see them. I swear that my heart has been burning inside for a year. I'm calling on people and the officials and everyone. I know that in Ramadan, you are comfortable with your families and having good night's sleep. But for a whole month, I was crying all the time and praying my kids will return to me. You all celebrated Eid with your kids, and you bought them new clothes. But I didn't know when the Eid was, and I was drowning in my own tears.
قبل رمضان ب15 يوم جونا.
15 days before Ramadan, they came to our house. My husband was praying and I was preparing for prayer as well. Someone started calling the name Muhammad in front of the house. So my son Ahmed came out and the gunman asked him what was his relation to Muhammad. So Ahmed said that he was his brother. So he took him and shoved him into a white car, and there was a blue pickup car. The white car moved and the blue one circled the house. Then my house came out, but a gunman held him at gunpoint and took him in the car as well. I started to shout, and I thought my son Muhammad, who is with the police, was injured in clashes in the airport, so I cried and shouted. But my nephew told me they were Al-Kaniyat gunmen and not about Muhammad being shot. I started crying because my son Ahmed was just 17 years old and he didn't know anything. I ran here and there with tears. I started to shout and call for people as the men were sitting near my house. My son Hamza called me and asked what was wrong with me. Hamza was in Tripoli because of Al-Kaniyat. I cried and asked why would Al-Kaniyat take them? They didn't do anything. My husband even offered them condolences when their brother Mohsen died. He doesn't like to hold grudges.
الليلة هذيك جينا إن لما طبوا خوتي يعني
When they detained my brother, I miraculously escaped them. My brother called me and said he was stopped on the road at a checkpoint and was detained, then hung up. I came to my brothers and said Abdulaziz was detained. So they all panicked, because in our family, when we hear of Al-Kani family, we know something bad will happen. And this is just the way it is in Tarhouna. Maybe people from outside the city, maybe people from outside this city don't know that. Then they started asking my brothers one by one. One of my brothers has 4 children, and the other has 7 children, and the other has 4. They took all from the same house and then came to me because I was living alone in my apartment. They knocked on the door, but I either didn't hear or was asleep. It was just the work of Allah. They left and took my 5 brothers in one night. On the second morning, I was oblivious to the whole thing till my mother came to my apartment and thought I was detained as well. She was crying and shouting, and as she was collapsing to the ground, I held her, and she told me to run away because all my brothers were detained or even killed. I left my apartment and went straight to Tajura, outside Tripoli, about 60 to 70 kilometers. I walked all the roads, hills and mountains. My best friend was with me. I sent him a message that I was fleeing, and he joined me on the escape journey. We first walked on foot from 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. to Aztarna area. We walked 24 hours, and when I later returned to Tarhuna, I was told that my best friend was detained and killed by Al-Kaniyat. We later held a funeral prayer for him at Tripoli Martyrs Square. Even those who helped with words, or those who are friends to you, were killed. Those who detained my friend are Mar'i al-Hish, Hatim Dandu, and Muhammad al-Billi, all from Asagya, and they were close to Al-Kaniyat. They caught my friend and insisted that he know secrets and my whereabouts as well as my weapons and money. They detained many people, including the man with me in the car here, and asked him, "Where is my money?" Abu Bakr Jabala told us about the 6 brothers of Al-Kani and how they had controlled Tarhouna before they became Haftar's bloodthirsty sidekicks. Jabala and other people we met in Tarhouna said they knew nothing about the bloodthirsty family before 2012, while some eyewitnesses from the city told us that Al-Kani family came to Tarhouna in 2006 and nobody knew to which tribe or family in Tarhouna they belonged. Al-Kaniyat became known after a fight that led to the killing of one of their brothers in 2012. He was killed by a group of Tarhouna residents, and this made Al-Kani family seek vendetta. So they started tracking down the killers and kidnapping them and also burning their houses.
This is the house of Al-Kaniyat family. Here was their father's house. The family of 7 was living here. Let's get inside and see.
This is their house where they used to live.
Yes, this is where they used to live. A very humble house for a poor family. But now you can go and see the villas and the luxurious houses they then moved to.
How many people were living here?
7 and all in this house with their mother and father.
This is Al-Kaniyat street right here. How was it like to pass through here?
It was an open street, but nobody was able to pass through it freely. If you entered the street, you were noticed as a stranger. Masked men would turn up with their arms and come to you from all directions. Sometimes they would be sitting roadside and then they would stop any passerby and carry out personal searches.
Is it because they are securing Al-Kaniyat?
Of course, they are protecting Al-Kaniyat, not Tarhouna residents. They lived protected because they knew that their day would come.
You told me Al-Kaniyat lived in grand palaces. Let's go see them.
Let's go.
هذا بيت محمد الكاني.
This is the house of the criminal Muhammad Al-Kani.
Muhammad.
These are the palaces where they lived. They got the money from the forcefully displaced people or from the people they killed, and the money they stole from the banks. This is the house of the criminal Abdul Rahim Al-Kani. Yes, exactly. These are his villas.
Al-Kani family didn't want to see any other prominent family in Tarhouna, and this includes Harouda family. So they started kidnapping the family's sons and women, and then demolished the houses and stores and factories.
Before Al-Kaniyat became a backup force for Haftar, a base that paved the way for his war on Tripoli in April 2019, and an integral part of Haftar's crimes, they managed to control all security units in the city in 2014, the year that saw the rise of the bloodthirsty family through the Security Commission of Tarhouna. Since 2014, Mohsen Al-Kani's name and his 5 brothers were known to everyone as they gripped the security apparatuses under their control.
They stormed my house and hit me with a gun stock on the head. And then they pulled me from my house to the trunk of a car. So I didn't know where they drove me to. I was almost unconscious. I was being framed inside the car and asked about relations to organizations or radar forces or security apparatuses in Tripoli or security parties from Misrata. Then they took me to Mohsen Al-Kani, and I was accused of the same thing. So Mohsen Al-Kani asked Salam Al-Isawi to take me to where I now realize it is the judicial prison.
I was at home when someone called me. I regarded him as a neighbor. He told me to meet him outside the house and said there were some problems. When I came out, I was detained by masked men, and they brought me to the prison. I was first put in a cell at the headquarters. It was 1 meter by 1 meter. They brought me to this room in here. This room here is now changed. There used to be steel tubes fixed to the ceiling. They had electricity cables that were used on our fingers in addition to a drill that we used to hear it. And also, one of the prisoners was tortured with holes in his feet.
What we call balanco was fixed on this ceiling and was used to hang the prisoners and tie them with the rope to this window. Then start torturing using PPR tubes and other hoses, in addition to electrocution. So a group of criminals lifted me up and tied the rope to my handcuffs and then connected it to the poles fixed to the ceiling and down to the windows. They started to pull me up and then let go of me very abruptly. So my arms were twisted and my hands' nerves were damaged due to the heavy fall. And also my hand was paralyzed completely. Hence I went into partial coma.
On one Tuesday or Monday, 3 days before liberating Tarhouna, as I remember, Abdul Rahim Al-Kani and a group of 5 or 6 militiamen came, including Doma's son, Mar'i Al-Hash, Zamblita, and the rest of the scumbags, excuse my language. They started to torture us with hose and cables, and some policemen went to get bricks, and Doma's son put a gun inside the mouth of a man from Misrata. Then Abdul Rahim Al-Kani started verbally abusing him and told him this was Tarhouna, not Misrata. Doma's son wanted to shoot him dead, but Al-Kani told him not to kill by bullets. So they brought the bricks and started killing using them, and we saw the blood leaking to our room, and so many witnesses can confirm this. Later, Al-Kani entered the room and saw a man from Warfalla tribe who worked in Abu Sitta naval base in Tripoli. Poor man. I don't know why he said he was working there while he was just an employee working on a computer, not a military man. So he was dragged and Al-Kani told him he was working with the Sarraj. Al-Kani threw him on the ground and we saw him from this area, where there used to be a wall, killing him with a brick. So well, all looked away appalled by the scene. Later the blood leaked to the room.
There was a man here named Sheikh Hamid bin Said from Souq al-Jum'ah, Tripoli. He sold Al-Kaniyat a plant nursery and then the road was blocked due to the war. So they tricked him into coming over issues with the plants and then they put him in the jail. He sat next to me and after 1 month he was killed outside this room. He had 13 children from 2 wives. There was also a man from Zlatan city. He used to herd camels between Zlatan and Tarhouna. So they captured him and put him here in jail with his fellow herder from Chad, who used to sleep here. When they used to kill people and the Chadian man goes after them, it meant that people were murdered for sure. I knew the Chadian herder and talked to him later after he got out from here.
We heard cries of women for 2 days and then heard the sound of gunshots.
They brought Haruda's son-in-law, the husband of Haruda's daughter, who was killed. I saw him wearing a jacket, so I thought he had cigarettes with him. I asked him what was wrong with him. He said he was from Tarhouna and he was brought here with his wife and her 2 sisters. He said his wife was sick and went to take her sisters to his house to check on her. He said he was Haruda's son-in-law and I told him to go and read the Quran, which was there on the window. And I told him that he was going to be killed. We didn't even finish our conversation when we heard gunshots killing the 3 sisters. We heard their cries and the sound of bullets.
My orphan nieces. 1 was married and 2 were taking care of their brother who was suffering from a mental illness. They were here in Tarhouna and we didn't expect at all that Al-Kaniyat would reach the point of kidnapping women and then kill them. And this assumption reassured the family and even their neighbors, yet they were abducted and killed.
As time passed, Al-Kani family attracted the attention of tens of outlaws and criminals who joined the family to conduct large-scale vengeance killings against opponents in Tarhouna and against anyone who opposed their control of the city.
This place is called Central Backup Unit and was one of Al-Kaniyat dens. They used to torture prisoners here and even killed some people under torture in here. As you saw the place, there is no lighting nor ventilation. There were here were some African nationals and others from Bangladesh. There were both foreigners and Libyans. All forms of torture. In there were several hanging tubes fixed in a way to allow the militias to hang prisoners from their hands and leave them dangling for about 2 days until they die.
For over 5 years, Tarhouna was under the grip of a family of bloodthirsty brothers whose profession was murder and torture. Al-Kaniyat controlled Tarhouna's institutions by force and by making alliances. The mastermind of the family was Muhammad Al-Kani, the eldest, who got the murder urge from Muhsin Al-Kani, who was the military man, and thus the family formed the 7th Brigade that contained the remaining Gaddafi Brigade's fighters and outlaws. And then they started their wars for money, power, and alliances to extend their grip outside Tarhouna in preparation for the war on Tripoli.
Muhammad, we know that this cell here was a notorious jail that went also viral on social media as people criticized the inhuman nature of these cages that aren't good even for animals. How was it that you were put in this cell, and what was this bleak, eerie place like?
It was against our will, as you know, even when we tried to enter the cell. We can't enter face first. Like me with this kind of physical shape, I couldn't enter face first because I wouldn't be able to turn around because it's less than 80 by 80 by 80 centimeter length, width and height. So we entered backwards, that is back first, so we can turn around.
First, I was placed here in the cell for 10 days.
The first 10 days, you were imprisoned in here.
Then, I was placed to this small room.
How was it that you were put in this cell, and what was this bleak, eerie place like?
Maybe 80 by 30 by 80.
We couldn't see anything, but we heard gunshots every day. It was clear they were killing people in this place, but we didn't see someone die. Yet, we only heard the sound of gunshots from a very close distance.
We used to hear people get killed here always. They used to take prisoners out of the cells, and then we would hear shooting and gunshots coming from outside. Killing was always for anyone who was related to anybody Al-Kaniyat wanted. They didn't care or bother to catch the wanted person, and we never heard them say, "You did this" or "You did that." They always captured and killed people because their cousins or any relatives were fighting in Tripoli or against Haftar's Operation Al-Karama. We heard the killing every day. I was an eyewitness to all of this. We didn't think we could survive and go back to normal life, but every tyrant eventually collapses.
Of course, from what we heard, some cells used to accommodate 2 prisoners. Maybe because Al-Kaniyat had lots of prisoners and didn't know where to put them. But we heard 2 people jammed in one tiny cell.
I wasn't waiting for release, I was waiting for death actually. There was a man next to me, and from his voice, I knew he was from my city. I told him, "Muhammad, we will die, and we won't make it out of here." I said, "If you died before me, pray for Allah mercy on me. If I died before you, I would pray for you."
Al-Kani family gained a geopolitical importance in the last 2 years when Haftar wanted to use their territory as a base to kick off his aggression on the Libyan capital. So Al-Kaniyat stepped in and had a major role in paving the way for mercenaries to enter through the southern parts of Tripoli, where they committed many massacres and demolished houses as they received unlimited support from Haftar and his supporting countries to help seize the capital. However, that didn't last long, as the aggression was repelled and all western region cities were liberated. The Libyan army and revolutionary fighters entered Tarhouna on the 5th of June last year, but the joy of liberation did not last long, as 106 bodies were found piled up in the morgue and rooms of Tarhouna Public Hospital, which made everyone realize that this would be the start of disturbing revelations and mass graves, thus turning Tarhouna into the bleak city that is burdened with pain and tragedy and wounds cut deep in their hearts, even deeper than the criminals buried their loved ones in Tarhouna lands. Over 300 people are missing, and tens of other people have been found in mass graves as search and identification of the missing persons teams continue to unearth new graves in the city by the day.
Kidnapping and killing by Al-Kaniyat was the norm. Over 350 victims, except for those who were from the city suburbs, such as Garabuli, Beni Walid, and Souk al-Khamis areas. I knew those people personally, either the victims themselves or their family or relatives. 131 bodies have been discovered in graves, in addition to the bodies found in a water well in Tarhouna, and others found in different graves in the city suburbs.
After the painful journey that we took to Tarhouna, we headed to the Tripoli-based House of Representatives Committee for Rights and Freedoms asking about how the officials are treating such Libyan human rights violations.
It was an unbearably shock. It was a very painful visit to Tarhouna, and we didn't expect to see such atrocities in the city. What the people suffered there was unbelievably tragic. The city residents are still in shock until today. They cannot comprehend the whole tragedy, which was very quick and painful. It was very clear that they didn't have the privilege of a choice or a decision or even the chance to escape from Tarhouna. Massive heinous crimes took place very fast in their city, and when we first visited it, we met with several crimes families and saw the locations where the violations took place and where secret prisons were set up for torture and killing. Human rights violations in Tarhouna is a very different situation, as it is very complicated, that includes seizures of properties, forced disappearances, victimization of children, men and women, as those who gripped the city under their control spared no one, neither people affiliated with them, nor their opponents, or even innocent civilians. As for prisons, one jail stood out to me as it contained a photo of Al-Kani, and the prison where inmates engraved their memories and phone numbers on the walls. The place spoke to me 1,000 words of tragic atrocities and violations against prisoners. We could even tell their number from the writings on the wall. The open square outside was terrifying, and the photo of Al-Kani outside was intimidating. We're now also working on a legal track for the victims. There are local and international parties involved in it. Libyans should demand this legal track works tirelessly in order to do the families of the victims justice, so that we can feel that those families were given some sense of justice. We don't want to see reconciliation without justice. They must work together. All Libyans are now talking about reconciliation, but justice isn't achieved yet. There were some local apparatuses that worked very well on the Tarhouna file, but their work didn't reach the needed demands. The sound of truth is still low and weak. We hope the upcoming days will bring about some work on the Tarhouna file, such as reconstruction or compensation. Tarhouna must be taken care of, because, let's be honest, what they went through was far from normal.
As deterring laws are absent in Libya, and Al-Kaniyat militiamen are still moving around with impunity in a status quo that allows killers to live among the innocent, there are many families of victims who are still afraid to appear on camera or even take their cases to court for fear of retaliation, as threats keep knocking on their doors on a daily basis.
We call on the authorities in the eastern and western regions to hand the criminals over to justice and to take care of the victims' families in Tarhouna. They should also tackle the issue of criminals who are still moving around in Tarhouna freely. Authorities must arrest the criminals and bring them to justice. We don't want them to take matters in our hands. We have faith in Allah and we believe in the rule of law.
If our rights to justice wasn't secured in life by the authorities, I believe that in the afterlife we will see justice. I just pray that Allah finds me justice against those criminals and murderers, and justice and patience for mothers who lost their loved one. This is a catastrophe that has befallen us, and we believe that those who were killed are martyrs.
I cry every day. I just look for them here and there. I didn't know what to do. They destroyed us. I pray that they get destroyed and that Allah will avenge our lost ones. Oh Allah, I ask you for patience. Please, patience.
الله اللي ياخذ الحق. والله يعني تو يسمعوا في يعني راني لي سنة محروقة.
I call on everyone, even Al-Kaniyat themselves, to inform me if they saw my two boys, whether alive or dead. If they are alive, I beg you, please set them free. They were just kids and had nothing to do with all of this. If they were killed, their blood will be on their killers and the officials' hands all across Libya.
ما نطلبش في حاجة تانية من غير ربي يرجعها بسلامة.
إن حكماء وأعيان قبائل ترهونة وهي تلتقي.
Tarhuna tribal elders and dignitaries. meet with a delegation from the eastern region, and despite our suffering as we dig out bodies from mass graves in one hand and extend the other to transitional justice and compensation in order to achieve national reconciliation and build the state of Libya.
As we came here in Tarhouna, we saw the mass graves and we talked to the people who lost their loved ones. Some lost 8 people and others lost 11 and so on. In fact, this is a crime and a heinous one indeed.